All right, well, welcome back, you guys. Today you're going to be watching me do a drawing of Kelsier from Mistborn. So if you haven't read Mistborn, I highly recommend it. One of my favorite series by Brandon Sanderson. Just absolutely love it. So with this piece, I decided to try and do sort of my standard drawing process. Just to kind of do every once in a while, I'm going through the process of doing the drawing instead of doing the tracing the subject. I'm trying to draw the subject just to gauge where my seeing is at, and inevitably every time that I go through this process I'm left a little bit disappointed. I do feel like I'm growing with my skill set. This one was number 30, I want to say 34, maybe 35 of 100 of my portrait series. While I feel like I'm getting better with the painting, I do feel like the portrait work is still a bit of a struggle. And I mean, in terms of the drawing of the portrait is still a struggle. There's kind of like, it feels a little bit like there's different disciplines colliding here. So drawing is to me, drawing is the fundamental baseline skill set that you need in order to be able to do good portraiture or any kind of drawing in general. And drawing is something that requires loads and loads of practice, like lots and lots and tons of practice. So I've actually been thinking that once I'm finished this series of these paintings, I think I'm going to go back and work on a series of drawings and just work on my ability to render and draw this stuff from seeing. And so you can see it's the standard process that I kind of use. It's like a loose approach, mimicking like Leyendecker and Bridgman, sort of a standard drawing approach, I suppose, to portraiture. It's tough because I feel like I did get somewhat close with this one. You can see that I'm doing a lot of measuring in this process. So, drawing lines, observing the face on the left, and then drawing, you can see on the right hand side, I'm drawing lines, trying to find sort of the structural components of the face. And I feel like I said, I continue to get closer with it, but it's still just not where I would like it to be. And my line work too is kind of heavy-handed and a little bit difficult to paint over. Still, which is something that I struggled with when I would work analog. So for all of my drawing life, I can remember basically I just push way too hard with my pencils. And I had a prof in university that I did an animation class with, and he stressed to me that I need to stop doing this when I'm drawing, sort of like reworking shapes. He was like, you just need to find the shape and draw it and leave it. And it's just something that I don't know, it's like I'm cognizant of it, but I'm not able to change that habit yet. So it's something I got to keep working at, because in order to use this for something to paint over, it needs to be cleaner. It's just, if I was going to work this up to a finished drawing, this is maybe acceptable practice, just for getting sort of starting to work out some of the structural components. But to use this as a guide to paint under, like using the similar practice that I'm using, it's just not really practical. I have considered that maybe what I should do is, on a couple of these, is try just straight up painting, which is something that we used to do in college. So in college, we would do a drawing like this underneath a piece, underneath a painting. We would just start painting, and that would just be like straight up blocking in shapes and forms and trying to get them accurate that way. It's a little bit of a different process, but I wonder if it would alleviate some of the struggle that I'm experiencing. It's more like working that way feels more like a whittling where you're sort of like putting down all the block of stuff, and then you're sort of chipping away at the refinement, which is kind of like taking a block of wood and carving away at it to reveal what you're wanting to depict underneath. So that's something that I've thought about as well, and maybe I should take that approach on a couple and just see how it goes. That's how I used to always work on canvas in college. It was through that kind of an approach. As you can see here in the video, like this is right now a time lapse. It's not screen capture, so this is a time lapse pulling the video out of Fresco. And then you can see here I'm doing my sort of customary evaluation of what the heck I'm doing. And yeah, like it was close. You could see it's close, but there's just parts that were off. The ear was too far forward, chin was a little too pronounced, too far forward. The one eye was a little too low. And then this kind of is what I'm doing here is refining. And so this is what I'm talking about. Like if I'm going to do drawing to get a portrait painted, I need to do an underdrawing so that you kind of can see it here in the lighter tones. It's quite rough. Then I need to set it back and do a cleanup drawing over top. This really extends the process for me, time-wise. It's a good exercise for sure, and something that I shouldn't shy away from in the way of growing my skill set and my abilities. But if you are going to do this kind of an approach, you just have to be mindful that this is time consuming. And it's good. Like, don't get me wrong. This kind of practice is very valuable and viable in terms of developing your skill set. So if you're looking at seeing and just the sort of ability of an artist to be able to portray what they're looking at in a 2D plane, this is where your practice is in drawing like this. If you're wanting to expediently complete projects, then it's like I've been doing, is just tracing and then getting the painting going underneath. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. So working on, working in that fashion of like just tracing, just to give yourself that boost of speed in order to complete the piece is acceptable. It depends on what your goals are. Right now, my goal is to complete 100 portraits. And so, that's what I'm striving for, what I'm working towards. So the tracing for me at this stage of things is acceptable practice. But like I said, if you're wanting to grow your ability to see and to accurately render what you're looking at, then this is the kind of practice that you would engage in. I would say even you could take a step back from it, and down the road, if I get more into these components of like explaining growth as an artist from a drawing perspective, we'll go through stuff like gesture, tone, line, structure, all those things, because what I'm doing here is kind of like the advanced end of portraiture on the drawing side. Not even the advanced end, maybe it's middle. Advanced would be working with charcoal or some other medium, probably on paper, and just straight trying to render that on paper. But this is kind of in that vein, right? So measuring features and then working towards a cleaned up state of a drawing. But earlier in the process, you would do a number of just studies, which are quick, head studies, shape studies, even just studying certain features like eyes, nose, mouths, ears, and more loose gestural work to get the idea and the ability to the capacity to comfortably and accurately render the proportions of a head, of a face. And that's one component of it. With what I'm doing here, we're shooting for likeness, right? So I've seen a lot of artists right now on Instagram that are doing what they're calling like semi-realism, which is kind of like cartoony looking portraiture. It's very popular, especially like pretty girls walking their dogs on the beach and doing whatever. But that stuff is kind of, in a sense, easier once you understand the aspects of proportions of a face and stuff like that, because a lot of those artists are using photographs as a reference point, but they're not going necessarily for an accurate likeness, which provides quite a bit of freedom in terms of the creative process, because you can kind of get a ballpark representation that's believable, and the audience viewing it will buy into that right away, and they kind of are able to, in one sense, your audience will be able to remove themselves from an interpretation of the facial features and just enjoy the piece for that's a person, if that makes any sense. In this case, and in the case of all my pieces, my hope is that a viewer will look at them, and if they're, maybe they're not aware of actors and stuff and they just like the content, and in that case they would look at it and they might just say, oh, that's a great painting of X character, which is fine too. Like in this case, they might look at it and be like, oh, that's a cool painting of Kelsier, and they might recognize it for the fact that there's coins floating around his head and you kind of see parts of his mist cloak flapping around and his hair and stuff, and just the feel of it. Maybe like the red sky or the red background kind of reminds them a little bit of like the red sky in Luthadel or Scadrial or whatever it's called. But that's like one layer of achievement from my perspective, is to get my audience to recognize that this is a character from X book. And if people recognize that, that's great. A step up from that for what I'm doing is, this is X character. Oh, cool. They've been fan cast as this actor, right? Which requires requires quite an accurate likeness for the audience to achieve that connection. And I guess that brings me kind of to my next point, which is, that's what I'm trying to achieve. So that's what my goals are. So in tracing, and as opposed to drawing like I've done here, I can more quickly get myself in a spot where the painting will represent the face that I'm drawing quicker. And so I'm not going to do these like full-on drawings all the time. I'm going to continue to do them every once in a while through this process. But I will come back to true sort of like drawing, I think when I'm done. The 100, I'm going to do I don't know exactly what it'll be yet, but it's going to be a series. I think I'll probably do it. I shouldn't say stuff like this because I always change my mind. I think it would be a good idea for me from a craft perspective and growth perspective to do a series of drawings and do more like study in the way of drawing, portraiture. And not necessarily based on fantasy books or anything, just practicing the craft of drawing. So that could include drawing regular people, drawing whatever, models on the internet or actors or whatever, but just whatever subject matter to push myself and my ability to see. So that's something that I'm cognizant of and kind of want to pursue in the future, because I'm not content with where my skill level is at. But it's going to be a while in coming. This stuff takes a long time to develop and to get better at. So just recognizing, I guess, that I'm like on the mountain face here, climbing, and you know, really technically just starting the middle of the portrait journey that I'm on, the 100. So I hope you enjoyed this little short one about the drawing, and I'll be showing you another video on this guy, digging into the painting of it soon. And so I hope you guys are doing well and hope you enjoyed this. I'll talk to you soon.